Can you walk on water? If not, 3-year-old me is probably judging you.
Good morning, friends. I just have the house alone to myself today, like no responsibilities. And so I'm like, what do I want to do with this? And so, I kind of want to work on my podcast because I really enjoy doing that. So we're going to chat a bit more today, talking about how Mormonism impacted how I interacted with others as a kid. Yeah, just to get started today. Sorry if there's a bit of a glare. I'm trying recording on my laptop today, which I don't usually do.
If you think the audio isn't good enough, please let me know by donating to my Patreon so that I can buy more supplies. Again, no pressure, but it does help out.
About how Mormonism impacted how I interacted with others as a kid.
So how I judged them, how I had missionary work as a little kid. So first thing I have here on my list, kind of a funny lead-in. So I had a recurring dream as a kid. I think I only had like twice, but it was like so similar that it still stood out, and I remembered it for a lot of years. And I think the first and second time I had the dream, it was like pretty far apart, like at least a few months, if not like a couple years or something. But the dream went like this. So I was maybe 8 to 10 range, and I was hanging out at the church, and it was some sort of not normal church activity. Like I think it was like cleaning the church, like setting up for girls' camp. If there were just adults and kids milling around or setting up for something. And we were bored because we were kids, and the adults were doing their thing. And so to entertain ourselves, we were running around in the church, like since no one was really in the rest of the building, like the rest of the building was like pretty dark. And so we would just run around and be like, ooh, like creepy. And this is the thing that we would do in real life as well. So I'm hanging out with my friends, running around, checking out all the dark classrooms. And then we find this one classroom and we're hanging out in there. And then people from the church, like some of the higher up leadership, locked us in there. And so it was like me and a group of like 10 kids or something. We're all locked inside one of these classrooms in the church in the dark. Like they just wouldn't let us out. And so we're like trapped in the church building, trying like an escape situation, right? And it was like for hours. Like I remember we were locked in there for a long time. Like I didn't know if my parents were like even aware of where I was. I feel like the sun set and like had become nighttime, and like all of us were still trapped in there. And so we were like trying to figure out like how the heck do we get out of here? And there was a window still in there, and they had made the mistake of leaving the window open, which like seems really obvious. Okay, it was still like a really hard escape room for, I don't know, for my dream 8-year-old son. But anyway, so we figured out we could open up the window, and I think it was the age range was probably maybe 5, like 13 in the group of kids. So we figured out how to open up the window, and then we kind of worked together to like climb out the window because it was very small and kind of high up. Maybe like chest height for an adult, but like since there were kids. And so we all helped each other get out, and end of the story, happy ending. But then I had a recurrence of this dream. And once again, we got locked in the same room. And so we were trying to figure out how to get out again. And it was the same group of kids. And we were like, man, did they leave the window open again? And we checked, and no, they had remembered, they had locked it. And so we're like, shoot. But then we realized that it's kind of a storage room. Like there was just random kind of furniture in there. I don't know. But apparently there was this big grandfather clock that was broken. And so there was an adult mechanic in there fixing the grandfather clock. And this is like a really small classroom. But anyway, but there's this guy in there, and we're like, hey, like we're trapped in here. Like, would you mind helping us get out? Like, could you use one of your tools or your wrench or something to break the window so we can get out? And so like, yeah, sure. And so he did that, and we got out. It was a happy ending. And that was the last time I had that dream. But I just think it's interesting as an ex-Mormon looking back. Like, I do feel like a lot of times my dreams just tell me something. I don't think it's like revelatory. I think it's just subconscious, like information processing, right? But I feel like a lot of times dreams like tell me something about myself that maybe I'm trying to like deny. And I'll just be like, oh wow, like I experienced that thing in a dream. Like this is bringing up surprising feelings for me. And then that could be content for later therapy or journaling or something. But I just think it's interesting, like as an 8 to 10-year-old, like that range, like I was having a dream about being trapped in a church building because like church leaders decided to like basically hold me hostage. And so, yeah, to move on to real life, we mentioned sneaking around the church. So that was definitely a thing I did with my friends. I don't know, there's something like kind of creepy and eerie about a church building in the dark, kind of haunted. And like, I mean, literally, like it's a pretty corporate building. Like Mormon churches have a very like typical look, like it's very bare bones, very simple, very like 70s core. And so like, I feel like if I were trapped in a cathedral or something with like statues, like maybe that would be creepy. Anything's creepy if you're in the right mindset, right? And then another thing I remember learning about the story of Moses and the burning bush. So for those of you who don't know, Moses was a prophet in the Old Testament who the Israelites, according to the Bible, I don't think this is historically supported, but the Israelites were like slaves to the Egyptians, according to the Bible, and Moses was the one who like liberated them from slavery. But when he was first called as a prophet, he like found this bush that was on fire, and the bush was not like disintegrating in the fire. So like, okay, that's weird. So he goes up to it, and then God starts speaking to him. It's like God is the fire in the bush. And so he's talking to Moses, and God's like, you're standing on holy ground because you're talking to God. Like, take off your shoes, like, show respect. But I remember learning that story as a kid. And so me and my like other peers would talk to teachers and stuff about, the church is a sacred building. So like, how about we take our shoes off at church? Like, really, we just wanted to run around barefoot, but we're like, Moses could do it. Why can't we do it? So we were like always arguing we should be able to run around barefoot at church because it's so holy. So it was kind of funny. And then my best friend growing up, we both went to the same congregation together, and like by regional boundaries. So you have like an assigned congregation you go to. So we'd hang out a lot at church. But there was one time we went to the Lost and Found at the church building and found someone's scriptures that had their name embossed in it. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is a mystery, like the mystery of the missing scriptures. That I was like, I'm a private detective. I need to find whose scriptures these are and return them. And so I like made my friend memorize the name on the scriptures, and I memorized it, and then like talk about it every so often. And like, it was mostly just me dragging her along. But then finally one day the mystery was solved because there was a teacher at my elementary school who was a member of the church. And that came up, and I was like, do you know so-and-so, like the name from the scriptures? And she's like, oh yeah, actually, he's in my ward. And so I was like, oh, can you tell him his scriptures are in the Lost and Found? And she's like, okay. And I'm like, mystery solved. I'm the best detective. I was so hyped about it. And I don't know, I find Lost and Founds in general kind of interesting. Like, so many stories, you don't know where these things came from. So kind of mysterious, I guess, inherently. Another, like, there's so many church activities. Like, oh my goodness, I need to do a video sometime about just how much time we give to the church, because it's legitimately insane. Probably minimum 2 hours a week for active member, and more realistic, probably 3 hours a week at minimum. And even that's like probably like a meh Mormon, you know what I mean? Between scripture study, callings, and church meetings. It's like not even getting into so many other things. But anyway, point being, me and my friend would hang out a lot together because we were at all these church activities. And so when we'd be like driving, we'd be like talking about stuff, and we'd just make up funny stories, clubs and nicknames. And there's like a lot of inside jokes and lore that would develop just because we were spending so much time together. But like, remember those things happening at the margins of church activity. I remember, oh yeah, we made that up while we were going to a church activity. And it's always while we were going to a church activity, it feels like. And then we also were in the same seminary class, which is that daily 1 hour scripture class that you do in high school. And so that was a lot of time spent together as well. And so we would just have a lot of my high school memories of my closest friends happened at church, just because we were there all the time. And then, oh yeah, so another crazy thing, you guys, that I remembered the other day, it's actually terrifying. So I mentioned in one of my videos, there's something called CTR rings. I'm gonna like draw a picture or something. The problem is that a lot of these images, I'm just kind of paranoid about copyright. So like, only use royalty-free images from Splash or something. Or if I have to use church images, I usually have like screenshots of scripture, like is about as far as I'll go. I do think I'm gonna draw more though, because hopefully own the copyright if I understand how that works. But anywho, there's a CTR ring, and yeah, so it's just like a little green shield that says CTR on it, and it stands for Choose the Right. And so this is a thing that they would like make really cheaply, and they would hand out to like all the primary kids. It's like really common on merch. I feel like I haven't heard about it as much recently. It might just be because I'm an adult. But definitely when I was in primary, it was like all the rage. Like, everyone was saying CTR. And the idea is that if you have it on your finger, then, you're like about to sin, but then you see it on your finger and you're like, oh, never mind. Like, let me follow Jesus. So as a little girl, me and my friend would like just be hanging out after primary or whatever. And I remember putting the CTR ring on my ring finger as if it was a wedding ring. And then I joke with my friend, like I'm married to Joseph Smith. And just the crazy thing is how close I was. You know what I mean? Like, Joseph Smith married a 14-year-old. Like, he had like 30 wives. And like, the later prophets also married minors. And I don't know, there's so much apologetics for this. Like, oh, it wasn't about sex. Oh, it was super consensual. It's like, these were children. Okay, first of all. Second of all, like, everything he explains about polygamy is for the purpose of raising up seed. So if that isn't sex, like, what is, right? And then it's also like how these women talked about it. Like, it was not pleasant for a lot of them. The 14-year-old he married was named Helen Mar Kimball. And she writes in her journal about how it was like really hard for her because she was like treated as a married woman at 14. So, like she wasn't allowed to hang out with her friends or go to dances, like do anything fun as a youth because she was like married, like she was taken off the market. And also she wrote in her journal that when Joseph Smith proposed to her, he told her like, hey, if you marry me, then you and your entire family will go to heaven. And so it was like huge amount of coercion, just the power imbalance, like literally the prophet of the church that everyone in your community is a part of, like the most respected member of the community is asking this 14-year-old to marry him and have the whole family's, like especially the father's approval. Like she's so pressured to do this. Like if she didn't marry him, her family wouldn't go to heaven. Anyway, so it's just so problematic. And for more info on that, I'll put some links in the description for more info on that. But anyway, just kind of crazy, especially that like when I was a little kid, I was saying like, haha, I'm married to Joseph Smith, like ooh, not like as a joke, like no, like legit, I was close, like I had no idea. And sometimes I would joke that I was married to Jesus as well in the same context with my CTR ring. And then another thing I remember is in primary we'd have, like pull out our scriptures during class, like read something. And I saw somebody else's scriptures that like when they opened their scriptures, they had really cool illustrations in it. And I was like, oh my goodness, they can draw so well. And then I come to find out I got a few years older and I realized like these translucent stickers you could put in your scriptures of significant verses that you can buy. I just remember that being kind of funny. And then, yeah, so there were some funny things about how I understood doctrine. So there's this doctrine in the church called consecration. And this is something that you covenant to in the temple. And the phrasing in the temple is that you promise to give like everything you have, everything the Lord has blessed you with or may yet bless you with, like your time and talents and money to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for the building up of the church or something. I don't remember the exact phrasing. You can probably look it up, but very, very close to that. But it does say to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, not to God, but to the church, which is very problematic in my opinion. And so much more could be said on that. But basically the idea of consecration is give everything you have to God and, bless you for it. And so in the very early church, there was like a law, like basically people who joined the church, everything they owned was basically given to Joseph Smith. And then he would dole back out to people like what they needed or how God wanted him to, right? So anyway, I remember learning about this in primary and they said you'd have to give everything to the church. Like today we don't do that anymore. Like we're encouraged to give everything to God and just kind of manage it in our own lives since we don't control the government anymore. And so anyway, as they were explaining that to me that you'd have to give everything to the bishop, I remember thinking like, wait, do you have to give your clothes to the bishop? And like in my head, I was imagining like you come into the bishop's office, you give him all your stuff, and then you have to like strip naked and give him your clothes. Like this was just what made sense in like 7-year-old brain. And I'm like, do you have to give them your clothes too? And they're like, yeah, you do. And I'm like that sounds hard. And they're like, it was a hard thing for the saints at that time. It's just so funny because I was like, they had to like strip in front of the bishop. Like my teachers all confirmed it because they didn't understand what I was asking. Anyway, it was just funny. I was like kind of freaked out about that. And I remember like being a little bit concerned that law would come back and we'd have to practice that again. So I just have to give the bishop all my clothes, and I'm like, ooh. And then another thing, so in primary, but we would talk about modesty, and so I just remember like, judging other kids for not wearing modest clothes to primary. Like if they were like showing their shoulders, like had a spaghetti strap or something, I judged them. And just a friend of mine had told a story, like she wore a spaghetti strap dress to primary, and then they were talking about modesty, and then she was like feeling really embarrassed about it. Anyway, it's just kind of crazy. I just hate the like kind of purity and rape culture that exists in the church. Just men's sexuality is so much the domain of women to control within the church, and that like even a 4-year-old and 8-year-old like has to cover their shoulders lest the men have impure thoughts. It's like honestly so disgusting. Just a crazy thing to teach little kids. And then I also remember the missionaries would often come to my house as a kid. They'd like every so often just meet with members, give them a lesson about the church, get dinner from them and stuff. There's kind of a regular standing thing. And we also had home teachers and ministers as well, which were just other members of the congregation who would do a similar thing, come to our house and like teach a lesson, just kind of to all communally strengthen each other in the faith. But I remember a lot of times when we had these house visits and these lessons, they would bring like object lessons for me as a kid. I remember there was one with Play-Doh where they had 2 colors of Play-Doh. They squished them together and mixed them all up. And they're like, okay, like, can you separate them? And I think the point was like temple sealing. Like if you get married in the temple, like God blesses your marriage and you can be together after you die. And then another one was tying shoelaces with one hand. And I honestly don't even remember what the point of that was. And then they often would teach the concept like the soul, like the spirit with your hand in a glove. And so they'd be like the glove is like your body and your hand is like your spirit that's like controlling your body. And then I remember one time they had a big jar and they brought some big rocks and some little rocks, and they were teaching that like you have to put the big important things in your life first, and then the little things. So they'd show that like you have to put in the big rocks and then the sand and then everything fits. And I think the idea was kind of like, pay your tithing before you pay for anything else. So like read your scriptures before you do anything else, or just like always put God first in everything, even when like you don't want to. And anyway, kind of funny with those object lessons though, because they'd be like, see, you can't do it. I was like contrarian sometimes as a kid. Like if someone told me, oh, you can't do that, I'm like, well, I'm about to show you. And so I'd work so hard to like tie my shoelace with one hand or to separate the plate. I'm like, don't tell me what I can do. Yeah, another thing I remember from primary is sometimes we would have special guests visit. Especially there was one particular primary leader who liked the idea of having special guests. So I remember one time Moroni, who's an ancient prophet from the Book of Mormon, came in and was like talking about his life and how he loved Jesus. Like everyone knew it was just a guy from our ward dressed up as Moroni. But we'd be like, ooh, today we're having a special guest and it's Moroni. Like, in walks brother so-and-so dressed up as Moroni. And then, oh yeah, also at church activities, sometimes we would have fun, like religion adjacent things. So one time we it's just like a week, like evening activity for the kids, like learn about Jesus and do something fun. There's a Choose the Right song. Choose the right when the choice is placed before you. In the light, the Holy Spirit guides. No, in the right, the Holy Spirit guides. And his light will forever shine before you. If in the right your heart confides. Choose the right, choose the right. Let wisdom shine the way before. In his light, choose the right, and God will bless you forevermore. Okay, so like legit, last time I sang that song was like years and years ago, so like these things are like bored into your brain. But anyway, but one time for activity, we were like doing silly music videos of primary songs. And so me and my group like dressed up with wigs and stuff, and we did that song, but we did it as a rap. So we're like, choose the right when the choice is placed before you. Woo! Anyway, we were like silly and adding little things into it. And then I also remember one activity we learned how to sew. We got like this little mason jar, like needles and thread and stuff in it, like instructions for different stitches. So a lot of times like very gender role stuff in the church. Like sewing in itself is not bad. Like sewing is not an activity that the boys would ever have done, I don't think. Oh, also something that was taught in activity days and later in what was called mutual, which was like the version for teenagers. I think they changed the name to activities for youth now, but it was mutual in my time. But it's just the concept of modesty. So I vaguely remember doing an activity where we'd learn about like, what is modesty. Like you have to cover your shoulders, you have to cover your tummy, not show cleavage, have long shorts. You do that, like honor your body, and your body is a temple. Like I feel like there was also definitely the undercurrent, like, and you don't want to tempt the boy. Like they can't control themselves, their brains are different, and they're like animal wired, like want to have sex with you. So one activity we did is we made a collage, like took cutouts, like a magazine that the teacher brought in, and we found like immodest women in the magazine, and we'd cut them out and paste them down, and we'd color over them, like get paper to make them new clothes so they would be like covered up sufficiently, and like make a collage out of that, which I don't know, it just it sounds so weird in retrospect. Oh, how judgy. This girl just wants to exist in peace, and instead you're like cutting her up, shaming her, and dressing her like, yeah. And then there was something called the primary program. So we would sing a lot in the church. We'd sing songs during primary, we'd sing songs in sacrament. There was always a choir usually running, at least throughout the year. There'd be like 1 or 2 times a choir would present something during the church service, and so you could sign up to do that. But the primary program is once a year. All the kids will showcase the songs that they learned that year about the church or Joseph Smith or Jesus or whatever. And so during a church service, they'll all go up to the front and sing a few songs, and they'll sit back down. It's the highlight of the year because you want to see all the little kids. And the sunbeams, those are like the 4 or 5-year-olds, maybe 3 to 4-year-olds. And they'll always be in the front, just like, not paying attention, waving at their mom. Like, they're just fun to watch because they're cute and little. But anyway, so I remember when I was a primary kid singing in the primary program, and usually they'd have like, a kid go up and say like, I know Jesus loves me because he makes me feel better when I'm sad. And like we'd sing a song, and then another kid would come up and be like, I know Joseph Smith was a prophet and that he translated the Book of Mormon. and like read off their little scripts for the program. And then we'd sing a few songs. But I remember that they wanted us to like look, put together, like professional. And so something they told us was to like act like your hands are just like these big gobs of meat, which is such a funny thing to say, but they just like keep your arms straight at your side. It's like a thing I still think about whenever I'm called on to sing, and I'm just like, keep your hands like chunks of meat dangling. But it worked. And then another thing from primary is a lot of times the kids get bored, right? So you do a lot of activities to try to keep them entertained. One of those examples are like we would do a lot of like singing activities. So like we'd be learning a song, like a church song, but then to keep people engaged, like spin a wheel and like, okay, now you have to sing it in a really high voice, or now you have to sing it in a really low voice, or really quiet, or really loud, or sing it standing up or whatever. And so they'd like kids come up to the front and spin the wheel, like sing it different ways. And then one kind of funny thing I wanted to briefly mention, I thought about making a whole video about Trek, but there has been a lot of coverage of Trek lately. Alyssa Grenfell just did a video. I saw Exmo Lex, I think, has previously done a video. Maybe it wasn't recent. I just watched it recently. So I don't know. We'll see if I make another one or not. But one thing I do want to briefly touch on is just pioneer culture in the church. So the Mormon pioneers under Brigham Young, they were facing a lot and the government's like, oh, maybe don't marry a whole bunch of women, not treat them like people. And I don't know how concerned the government was about women versus like adultery, but either way, not a fan of polygamy. The Brighamite branch had to flee to Utah, which was at the time part of Mexico, kind of set up camp there, and like in a ring of mountains, it's like in a little valley. And so it was pretty safe from the government. Like they couldn't really be interfered with very much. They were like free to practice their polygamy in peace. And anyway, but we just like revere them a lot. Like that's a big part of our founding story. And so we talk about pioneers a ton in the church. And there's something called Trek, which is like a camp where you like role play as pioneers, like go on this long hike, like pushing hand cars. And every year for Pioneer Day, in Utah, it's like a day off. Like I have off of work for Pioneer Day, and there will be like fireworks. Like it's like the bigger 4th of July in Utah. And I think there's even a parade. And like outside of Utah, it's not as big of a thing. But like in primary, if we had like a teacher who is a Utah native, like went to our war, like they would talk a lot about pioneers that day. Like I remember one time like arranged to have a hand cart brought to the church, so all of us kids like go check it out, like just outside near the parking lot. And one year a teacher like hardtack in, which is like these horrible, god-awful, really dense, like plain just white crackers. And she said like pioneers would eat that and like suck on it and try to chew it like crazy hard. Something else they did is sometimes they like hide things around the room, and then kids would have to find it and like sing the song that was on it. So I remember one time for Easter, I did this because I was a primary teacher at one point. And I like little Easter eggs and like names of primary songs inside them. And so the kids would have to find the Easter egg and then we'd sing that song. But one time there was a primary teacher who made cow pies, like cow poop, for Pioneer Day. So she like made like, these brown foam poop piles, and on the back they would have the name of the song. It was so funny. But so she'd hide those around the room and be like, okay, go find the cow pies. For Pioneer Day, or maybe they were like buffalo chips or something, because I think they used to burn that for fire. So yeah, pioneer culture is just weird. And then every so often we would talk a lot about like our family history as well, and a lot of people have like a huge family history in the church. Like me personally, my 4th grade grandparent joined the church and like crossed the plains and all of that. And so it's like a really big point of pride, like a thing that we talk about a lot in the church is the pioneers. To the point that the old Wi-Fi password was Pioneer 47, because the pioneers reached the Utah Valley in 1847. So that's how I always remember that. And then, so that's about it on that. And then, so priesthood blessings was another part of my childhood. Every year when I started a new school year, we would sit down and my dad would give us all priesthood blessings. So he would lay his hands on our head and he would say, by the power of the Melchizedek priesthood, which I hold, and in the name of Jesus Christ, I give you a blessing for this new school year. And I bless you that your brain will work super good and you'll have lots of friends and you'll know that God loves you. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. And he just like ad lib whatever he thinks God wants us to hear. And I like write down often like kind of bullet points about my blessing afterwards, so like look back on it. And kind of the idea was that like God would just protect you that year. And I remember somebody told in church one year that there was a family with a lot of kids, and the dad was doing school blessings, that he gave all the kids priesthood blessings, except for one boy didn't want to do one. And so he said, nope, I don't want a blessing. And then that year, the boy got in some accident, like wasn't able to like do his favorite sport because of the accident. Like school was really hard, and it was like a really rough year for him. And so the next year when it came time to do the priesthood blessings, he's like, oh my goodness, last time I didn't get a blessing, so this time I need a blessing because clearly that backfired. that somehow that caused like the accident and the horrible year he had, which is just a crazy thing for a kid to think. Anyway, wild. And then for holidays, growing up as a kid in the church, there were two things I want to mention. One is trunk or treat. So every year, like right before Halloween, we would have a trunk or treat. Like everybody would come to the parking lot and they'd open up their trunks and they'd decorate their trunk like for Halloween, and they'd hand out candy and people would get all dressed up. It was like trick-or-treating, like out of cars. And that was a very typical thing we did all growing up, and I really loved that. Oh, and having holidays on Sundays was the worst because there's so many things you can't do on Sunday. We would always hear in church, don't focus on what you can't do on Sundays. Think about what you can do on Sundays. The idea being like it's a pleasure to sacrifice for God, and it's a pleasure that you get to serve him on Sundays and go to church. And functionally, Sundays suck. Like you can't watch your favorite shows, you can't play video games. Different families are different. Like in mine, we were very devout and there was very little you could do on a Sunday. Some families get dressed up for church in dresses and such and then come home and get on pajamas or get on jeans. We were like a wear church clothes all day kind of family. Yeah, it was very, very limited what you could do. So it really sucked when holidays were on Sundays. Like for Christmas, like first of all, you'd have to wake up and go to church on Christmas Day, and then you'd get home and you'd open all your toys, but then there would be a lot of things like you can't really do on a Sunday. Like if there was like a video game, like you'd have to wait for the next day. Like you were just a little more limited. And then with like birthdays on Sunday, that was also kind of sucky because you would have to go to 3 hours of church at the time. It's since changed to 2 hours. And then, yeah, like you wouldn't be able to hang out with your friends or have a birthday party, like anything on your birthday because it was Sunday. Like, oh, Sundays. So that always sucked.
Hello, I just wanted to come on here real quick and talk about my Patreon. So if you have been enjoying this content, then please consider joining my Patreon. Tiers start as low as $1 a month right now. So I have blog posts kind of about life updates and just things I've been thinking about Mormonism. I have some like religious drawings I've done over the years, like comics and things. So have a time-lapse video of me drawing my profile picture. I'll add future time-lapse videos of me doing art. So I try to show all these videos and be like 30 minutes. But oh my goodness, I talk so much. It's really hard to keep it to 30 minutes. For example, this one, I think the total raw footage is about maybe 2 hours that I'm going to try to shove into 30 minutes. So if you're interested to see the more in-depth play-by-play, less edited version, then I will be posting that on Patreon. Once again, tiers start at $1 a month, and there are a bunch of different tiers with some fun names, so you can check that out. No pressure at all, but it is really helpful to me to be able to fund my editing software. I also would be interested in getting nice like camera audio equipment at some point. So if you're interested in seeing more of that, then you can head on over and check that out on my page. So thank you so much, and back to the video.
Hello, friends. I am back after a brief snack break, and we'll hop right back into it. Yeah, so there were some ways that Mormonism also impacted how I interacted with non-members, so people who were not members of the church. Are some of the rules I had to live by. No sleepovers or Sunday parties. So the sleepover thing is based on a quote from a general authority from way back in the day that was saying that basically nothing good happens at sleepovers. I was never allowed to have a single sleepover. The only exception was when my parents were like out of town, and so I had to stay with another family. Like if my mom was in labor, so that kind of situation obviously didn't count. I did do layover. Like if there was a sleepover I was invited to, I would go and I would have to leave like 11 p.m. or like around there, 10 or 11. I would be picked up and brought back home to sleep. And then also Sunday parties. So if I was ever invited to a birthday party from a friend at school that was on a Sunday, I was not allowed to go because that was not appropriate Sunday activity. And oh my goodness. So I mentioned earlier, or actually in my last video, that the church has like kind of cartoons for children teaching doctrinal principles. And there's one that they have teaching the importance of keeping the Sabbath day holy. So the story in this video is that there's a kid who wants to go to a birthday party that he's invited to, but it's on Sunday. And so he goes and he's having a great time until he sees the church building, and then he's filled with guilt and it totally ruins the day for him. And the moral of the story is that you should not go on a Sunday because then your conscience will convict you and you'll know that God is disappointed and like ruin it for you. Anyway, it's so messed up. And there's this video where Alyssa Grenfell and a friend of hers, like another YouTuber, I forget his name, but he's ex-Jehovah's Witness, and there's a lot of similarities. But anyway, they're like talking about this video, and one of the things they said is like he was having a great time at the party. Like the problem wasn't the party, like it was a totally appropriate place for him to be, but the problem was seeing the church. That just seeing the church building made him feel so judged. he couldn't enjoy the party. And then a few morality things. So I was pretty intense about my morality even as a kid. When I got a little bit older, I also developed OCD, so that didn't help. But even like a 10-year-old, I still had a religious zealot streak in me. That when I was in 5th grade, we were singing a song at the end of the year, like our 5th grade graduation. The whole class was singing a couple songs, and they were like, I Believe I Can Fly, like one other one. I think it was like It Takes Two to Make a Thing Go Right, maybe? I can't remember. Anyway, but we were singing a song as our, like, the whole grade. And there was a line in the song that said something about the word stupid. Like 10-year-old me knew that stupid was a bad word. I was like, I cannot sing this song. This is against my religion because it has the word stupid in it. And my parents were trying to tell me, like, it's okay. And also, like, you could just skip that word. Like, I felt like I had to just be excused from the whole thing, like, be a good example. Like, I just could not participate because it was so against my religion. And anyway, eventually, the way we resolved that is that my parents looked up the words, and apparently it wasn't actually stupid. It was stupid with 2 O's. It was like STOOPID. In retrospect now, explaining this as an ex-Mormon adult, I'm like, did they lie to me? I don't think they did. I don't think they would do that, but also, like, they could have, and I wouldn't have known, probably. But anyway, although I feel like I would have told them to show me. I don't remember. But anywho, so it was stupid with 2 O's, which apparently meant cool or something, is what we decided. So I was like, all right, I was appeased enough to go through with the performance. But that was like a big crisis for, like, I remember feeling genuinely very stressed out. Like, do I need to, like, walk out of this? Like, what are we going to do? And then another thing that I think is really problematic in how I interact with other people was there's a lot of, like, toxic positivity in the church, and I'll talk about this more in another video. But there's a lot of, like, pressure to forgive people even if they don't deserve forgiveness. Like, if someone does something unkind to you, like, you need to forgive them, which you should recognize that they're human, they're the product of their experiences, that what they did to you probably isn't really personal, it's more about them than about you. But I think there's a important part of trust of, like, even if they were to change, they're not allowed in your life anymore. Like, they have broken your trust. Like, you did not deserve how you were treated. Like, yes, we hope they learn from their mistakes and can do better in their future relationships, but that will not include you ever again. I think that's, like, a healthy kind of forgiveness. But I feel like in the church, and it has gotten better over time, like, they have started to say, like, forgiveness doesn't mean, like, letting someone who's unkind back into your life or, like, trusting people who don't deserve trust. But I do feel like there's this big pressure. Like, the second someone does something wrong to you, like, you should just be like, oh, like, it's okay. Like, don't worry about it. And it has softened a little over the years, but I, like, still feel like there's that kind of cultural pressure. Like, don't hold grudges. Just let things go. Like, be kind of conflict avoidant. So one example, this actually still makes me so mad as an adult. Like, honestly, the worst effing thing ever. I try not to say the F word on here because I'd have to edit it out. But anyway, worst effing thing. But one of my 5th grade teachers, I had, like, a pair of teachers who would do different subjects. Anyway, so one of my 5th grade teachers, basically we would have a lot of homework for, like, tests and stuff. I had a hard time staying organized as a kid. Was one time, like, forgot to turn in my homework or something, and I think another girl had too. So she took us to out in the hallway and talked to us, and she just told us point blank, you guys, if you don't, like, shape up and start doing better about turning in your homework, then the only job you're going to be able to get as an adult is flipping burgers at McDonald's. Like, I hope you're ready for that destiny, because, like, you better shape up or that's what you're headed for right now. It's just flipping burgers. And, like, I have no words. Like, what the F, lady? What the F? Anyway, she pissed me off so bad. It's a wild thing to say to a 10-year-old. Wild. Anyway, it actually makes me so mad. But anyways, but throughout my life in the church, I got so many messages like, forgive people, don't hold grudges. There's this doctrine in Mormonism that you literally can't be angry. There's this verse that says, in the Sermon on the Mount, thou shalt not kill, but I say unto, like, whoever is angry with his brother without a cause, like, he should, like, be afraid of hellfire. I'm like, okay. But Joseph Smith claimed, like, have direct revelation from God, right? At one point in his life, he was reading the Bible, and he was like, you know what, a lot of things in here are, like, translated correct. Like, over the years, precious truths have been lost, and God is going to restore to me what's the actual thing it should say. So in Mormonism, that verse reads, like, woe unto him that is angry with his brother, like, for he shall, have hellfire. Like, that specifically Joseph Smith removed the words without a cause. Like, as a Mormon, you're like, even if there's good reason to be angry, you cannot be angry. Like, it is a forbidden emotion. Like, Jesus turned the tables, right? Like, I feel like kind of this sense, God can be angry. Vengeance is mine. The average Mormon needs just let it go. No, don't worry about it. No anger ever. And like, I think, there's something to be said about like controlling your temper. Like you don't like go cuss out whatever random person like annoys you that day. But like, I think anger is an important emotion. Like, it's telling you something. Like, it is your body trying to keep you safe, And so I think just straight up denying emotions, like vilifying emotions, is just not helpful or healthy. But my whole life I was angry at this teacher because she hurt me. She told me I was basically destined for nothing. And like, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with flipping burgers at McDonald's. I actually think it's pretty classist and judgy of her to say that that's the worst that could happen to, because some people are stuck with like society's rough. So like, no judgment to anyone who is flipping burgers. You gotta do what you gotta do. But I do think it's unkind that she was framing that, first framing that as an ultimate failure, which I think is already problematic. But then saying that because I, as a 10-year-old, forgot my homework, like basically I was going to amount to nothing in life. But I felt so much pressure to try to forgive her and like recognize that that was wrong of her to say. I struggled with that for a lot of years. I spent a lot of time writing her letters and being like, I forgive you, and praying for forgiveness and trying to see from her point of view. Like, she's a human. We don't have to hate her as a person. Like, we can recognize that she is also the product of her experiences and hope that she does better in the future. But like, that was a messed up thing to say. Okay, and then so some other funny ways I interacted with other kids. I don't know if y'all did this, but I feel like there was a lot of pop philosophy going on in some of the younger grades in elementary school. Like occasionally at lunch, we would just like discuss, politics or law. We had really intellectual conversations, and of course they're at like 8-year-old level. So like funny things would come out of that. But I remember one time we were talking about like having sex out of wedlock, and we didn't really understand the concept, but like someone said it's illegal for your parents not to be married. And so we were all weighing in on whether or not we thought it was legal for your parents to not be married. And I'm sure I said it was illegal, but it seemed like everyone whose parents were married said it was illegal if your parents weren't married, and everyone whose weren't said it was fine. But I remember that being a conversation, which is interesting because like we didn't even really know what sex was at that age. At least I didn't. And then I also remember one time in art class, we were talking about kind of priestcraft and like the ethics of charging for religion. And there was this one boy who was like, we pay for my church, and we're all like, well, that's dumb. Like, we go to church for free. Like, we're not gatekeeping over here, which is also funny. Make a big point that going to church is free, which technically it is. And to be like a worthy member, you do have to pay 10% of your income in perpetuity. But anyway, we were all telling him like, that's priestcraft, like that's gatekeeping, you shouldn't be charging for church. But then he was telling us like, it's kind of dumb that y'all go to such cheap churches. Mine is actually quality. Also, one time when I was in preschool, a friend of mine mentioned that her mom drank coffee, and I informed her that coffee is in fact against the law, that you're not allowed to have coffee. I often would get mixed up between the laws of the church and the laws of the land. So since coffee is against the word of wisdom, I understood it to be against federal law. Also, I think I mentioned before, but Mormons don't say, oh my God, or like Jesus Christ when you stub your toe or anything. Like, they're not allowed to say that. So I remember when I was in 5th grade one time, my teacher, my other teacher, not the crazy one, said, oh my God. I like pulled her aside after class, and I'm like, can you please not say that? It's like against my religion and so offensive. And she was like, so apologetic. She's like, oh my gosh, like I didn't mean to offend anybody. Like, I'm so sorry. And then I was also in like an assembly one time, and there's a girl who was like 2 away from me. Like, she wasn't even talking to me, and I just happened to be sitting next to them and overheard their conversation. And one of the girls was like, oh my God, and like leaned over and tapped her and was like, hey, can you say gosh? And she's like, gosh? And I'm like, no, instead of saying oh my God. And she's like, oh sure, okay. And I was like, thanks. Anyway, and then oh yeah, I had a friend. We were really close friends in like 4th grade, and I went over to her house one time, and they gave me some hot cocoa. And it was dark, like it kind of was a little bitter, and I didn't know what coffee tasted like. And I was like, oh shoot, like what if there's coffee in this? But I was like, I don't think there's coffee, but I was like really stressed about it. And then also so I remember kind of judging her parents, especially like her mom having the partner she had. So they were not marrying, so already that's a big thing I would judge. I also remember thinking it was kind of weird that one of them was black and one of them was white. There is a lot of history of racism in the church, and like interracial marriage kind of being like straight up being against the rules early on, kind of becoming a taboo, and like started to fade out slowly. But still every so often it'll come up. Like I was talking to my college roommate one time, who was a person of color, and she was saying that she went to church one time, and the bishop's wife was like giving a talk in church, and she was like, so we need to, check ourselves, make sure we're doing the right things according to the gospel. For example, are we having feelings for anyone of a different race than us? Like, that would be a thing to watch out for. And my friend is like, what? No one's gonna say anything. Like, that's definitely one of those things that's like more cultural now, pops up every so often, even though it's not focused on as much. And I'm not sure if I judged her parents for being interracial because of the church or just because of broader society. Like, maybe it was just that I didn't see a lot of Black representation around me. But for whatever reason, I never remember judging her mom specifically. And I'm curious, I don't know if that was like, the woman is the gatekeeper of virtue thing, or if it's because the mom was white, or it might have also just been that I spent more time with her mom. Like, she might have been home more frequently, but I do remember that and problematic, obviously. So apologies to them for any judgment they may have felt for me. Oh yeah, so another funny thing. I was thinking the other day and talking to my husband that like, I don't remember a time where I didn't know that I would get married and have kids. I feel like that was just such a default. Crazy. Like, I didn't, like, I just thought that's what God needed me to do. Like, there was never a question ever in my mind about not having children. Like, that was never an option. Anyway, and then also just like getting married. Like, of course I was going to get married. Like, it was literally like a commandment of God to get married. Like, being single, like, we talked about being single in the church, being really selfish, like not choosing to follow the commandments of God, not wanting to go to the highest level of heaven. I don't know, it's like a conscious rebellion against God to want to be single. Yeah, so kind of how that manifested itself is that I was very boy crazy from a very young age. It was a default that I would like men. Queer is absolutely not allowed. Like, I was always thinking about marriage. I think for me, it was, I don't know, it's like fun for me. I do enjoy the game, like crushes and dating, the kind of just silly strategy behind it and giggling with your girlfriends and all that. Like, it is fun. But also, I don't know, I feel like it was just a huge part of my awareness as a kid. Anyway, and so yeah, there was a guy I had a crush on when I was 10. And I remember knowing, like, if I was going to marry him, which I was already planning to do at 10, that he would need to be baptized into the Mormon church. Because, so Mormons believe that families can be forever. Like, after you die, you can stay with your loved ones in heaven. But the only way you can do that is by being married in a Mormon temple. Like, if a Baptist couple is married, or like Catholics, if they're married, like, all of those are invalid. They're all going to be separated at death. But if you're married in a Mormon temple, no, that is going to stay around, which is crazy. Anyway, whole other rabbit hole. But so I knew that, and I knew that I had to marry a Mormon. Yeah, it's the whole program. No, but it was okay if he was a convert. So I remember liking this kid when I was 10, so I knew he had to become a member of the church for me to marry him. I got this pamphlet about temples. I brought it to my crush at school, a 10-year-old. I just told him, I wanted you to have this, and I just handed it to him. Like, he must have brought that home as prison. Like, what the heck? Like, it's just the wildest thing that I was like trying to convert him specifically so I could marry him because I had to, because I was Mormon and he had to be Mormon. Anyway, and also a funny thing with him is that I like had a crush on him so intensely. I was so into this guy. But one time he made a very off-color, inappropriate joke, and it totally turned me off. And I'm like, I don't like this guy anymore. He doesn't have high enough standards. Do you want to know what the joke was? So the joke was, he was saying, I imagine that when babies are born, their first thought is, I'm out. That was the whole joke. Just the fact that he was like offhand mentioning the birth canal, that was too inappropriate. I don't even know. Anyway, so rise and fall of that crush. Rest in peace, my heart. So dumb. Yeah, and then another thing is my extended family. So I had a lot of family who weren't members of the church. And so, like, my grandparents would come to visit, and, my grandma would be drinking coffee, and, like, really judged her for that. I was like, wow, like, she claims to like Jesus, but, like, she's doing it all wrong. And then also, like, one of my family members was divorced and had remarried, and I judged that a lot because the Bible says, don't divorce, and, like, marriage is supposed to be forever. Like, they had gotten sealed in the temple, but then they divorced. A lot of my family wasn't active, like, wasn't going to church as frequently, which is really stigmatized. And then actually a couple of my grandparents was just straight up not a member of the church. They were just other brands of Christian. And then one time we went to visit my grandparents, and they had a pool in their backyard, and they like invited a whole ton of people in their neighborhood, and they had like a barbecue, and we were all swimming. But it was a Sunday. Like, generally we wouldn't swim on a Sunday. And so I remember my mom and dad pulling things aside and saying, like, we love grandma and grandpa, like, they don't go to church. I know normally we don't swim on Sundays, but just today, since we love them and we want them to feel appreciated and loved, we're going to choose to swim today because We don't want to risk them feeling hurt, so we want to spend time together while we're here. And so we swam on that day. But I do remember while I was wearing my swimsuit, I'd have to forget it was Sunday. I laughing and playing with somebody and having a really good time, and I was like, oh shit, it's Sunday. I need to be being reverent, I be a bit more calm, not as silly and crazy. It's today's Lord's Day, so we need to be more professional almost, because it's God's day. Anyway. And then something I mentioned before is that we would wear our church clothes all day. And that was a big part of it. My parents would always say it was remind us that it's Sunday, which to be honest is a problem. And it would be so easy to slip up because if you forget it's Sunday, you're oh, let me just run down to the store really quick. I'm going to go out to eat or whatever. And you can't do that on Sundays. And so it is handy to remember what day is Sunday for those purposes. That's why we would wear dresses on Sunday. It's that tactile reminder so not do things that aren't appropriate for Sunday. There was one time I almost bought something on Sunday. I was at a school overnight camp, and I went to the gift shop at a museum, and I was trying to decide which of a few different things I wanted to buy as a souvenir. I'm oh, wait a minute, it's good I didn't buy one yet because it's Sunday. So I'm oh my gosh, that was close, and so I didn't buy anything. Oh yeah, we couldn't swim on Sundays. I feel that was more a reverence thing, a don't have too much fun on Sunday kind of thing. And obviously you're wearing swimsuits, which isn't dressing. I feel there's kind of the sense anything you can do in a dress is appropriate for Sunday, kind of more chill, restful activities. Not swimming or zip lining, but maybe a calm walk around the neighborhood. But anyway, another interesting thing about swimming is this folklore in Mormonism. So the church has changed an awful lot since Joseph Smith. So Joseph Smith was in an era where there was a lot more folk magic about it. I should do a later video about it. But anyway, so it's kind of just a different world. And so there's a lot of stories from the early church that are similar, the Pentecostal stories in the Bible. In the modern Mormon church, it's pretty chill, speak in tongues or any of that ever. But in the early church, that was very common. It's people would see the devil, people would speak in tongues, it was much more happening. And so one interesting story from early Mormon church that's also in the Doctrine and Covenants is that one time Joseph Smith was traveling with some fellow leadership group, and they were going go in a boat to travel somewhere. They eventually decided not to do that, and Joseph Smith claimed that God, speaking to him, had said that they weren't traveling by water because Satan controls the waters. God controls everything. Satan has more influence on the water than he does just anywhere else. And so just very interesting thing that I didn't really learn about that until I was in seminary and we were learning about church history. And it came up yeah, they used to believe this. We didn't really believe that all that much anymore. A rumor, a folk tale kind of thing in Mormonism. But it is interesting because it is canonized in script. I don't know if it's that blunt. I don't know if it's that direct. Satan controls the waters exactly that phrasing. But I do know that it's in the Doctrine and Covenants. Doctrine and Covenants. But yeah, so something interesting about that is that that does impact the modern Mormon church as well. So my partner was telling me that when he was growing up, he had heard as a kid that Satan controls the waters. And so that was given as one reason that we're not allowed to swim on Sunday, because on Sunday we don't want to be in Satan's domain. And it's also a theory about why missionaries can't swim. In my opinion, I think the reason that Mormon missionaries aren't allowed to swim during their mission is probably more of a liability thing, not wanting missionaries to get injured. But another hypothesis that people will talk about is because Satan controls the waters. And then at school, I had a science teacher in 6th grade who had a child out of wedlock or with her boyfriend or whatever. And she was a member of the church. I felt so much kinship with this woman. There weren't a lot of people who were members of the church at that point in my school. And so I was, it's us two against the world. And I saw her at state conference once, which is a kind of a bigger regional area, meeting, training that we'll do with where the leadership comes and talks to people. And anyway, so I judged her a lot for having a kid. And she it was kind of sad, honestly, because she told us she was pregnant. And I'm she's not married. What's with that? Are you a fake Mormon? Did you not get the memo not to have sex? Hello? And I was 11 and I was judging her pretty hard. But then her boyfriend ended up leaving her and it was really sad. And she was left with this kid on her own. And she vent about it a little bit to the class. Yeah, this piece of shit did this. Anyway, so yeah, I feel I was thinking you kind of walked into that one. I was you had sex out of wedlock. What did you expect? Which is horrible. Truly horrible thing to think. Just the world was very black and white at that time for me, and Mormonism was truth. It was reality. So I just thought people were so dumb who weren't following it, especially when they already knew about it. Well, you really had no excuse. So I judged her pretty harshly. And then something else interesting is I was really into being modest as a kid. I never ever wore spaghetti straps. I never wore really short shorts. Like I always dressed like to cover the sacred garments even before I had them. Anyway, because of that though, it's very interesting to see how broader purity culture exists in society. Because when I was in 6th grade, I would wear my skirt uniform. I went to a private school in 6th grade, and we had skirts that went down to our knee. And so I just wear them normal, and I think they barely covered the knee too. And a lot of the other girls at the private school would roll up their skirts really high so they'd like mid thigh, and I would just wear them long because I needed to be modest. And I remember one time an older teacher came up to me at school and told me, "Thank you so much for wearing your skirt correctly, because like all these girls are like, making their skirts way too high. So good on you for like dressing, professionally and respectfully. Nicely done being modest," which is just weird. I don't know. It's just weird. I hate it when older people comment like really young teenagers' bodies, young women's bodies. I don't know. It's just uncomfortable that she's like, "Good job not being a slut," Anyway, it's just weird. And another thing, because I was like obsessed with honesty and because I judged my peers a lot for being inappropriate, I often would hang out more with teachers, and I was kind of the teacher's pet a lot of times. And because of that, I did get special treatment. Like I would be allowed to do things that the other kids weren't allowed to do. And then also sometimes teachers like trust me with their keys, like to their classroom, like forgot something in the classroom and it was locked. I could ask the teacher to run back and get it, and they just hand me their keys. I got a lot of privilege because of that, which again is interesting. I feel like people often really liked me, or especially adult. Like people liked how rule following I was and how old soul I was, and how I didn't want to break any rules and I didn't want to be sexy. I was just very inhibited, and I also was a really big people pleaser and still try not to be now. Like it earned me a lot of credit with teachers and with other adults. And then one other thing, what kind of harkening back to the like first line of this video. So when I was like 3, and my dad told me this story, I learned that Jesus was able to walk on water. And so one time I asked my dad, I'm like, "Hey, so Dad, Jesus could walk on water, right?" And like, "Yes." And I'm like, "Can you walk on water?" He's like, "No." And so I'm like, "So if you have faith, why can't you walk on water, Dad?" I'm like, "What's your problem?" And so I judged him for not being able to walk on water. And anyway, he brings it up like a funny story. Like truly, I was intense. Like I was very much taught, like, if you love Jesus, you should be expecting these things in your life. So it's really disorienting when they don't show up. And another thing kind of funny about my whole childhood is that walking on water thing, like I kept having it reinforced over and over again that if you just have enough faith, you can do anything God asks you to do. Like you can defy the laws of physics. Like if God tells you to walk on water and you believe that you can do it, like if you truly believe without a shadow of a doubt, then you can do it. But you have to believe enough. Well, just for years, I would try to walk on water, like very frequently. I remember going to the pool and like be jumping into the deep end, and I'd be like standing there at the edge, like psyching myself out, like, I can walk on water. Like, I know I can do this. And I'd walk in and I'd just fall, of course. But I did this for years. And then I think eventually I kind of internalized, well, it's only going to work if God commands you to do it. So kind of summary of key takeaways I want you to have from this video are that Mormonism, when I was a kid, it was kind of taught to me as the default. Like it was just the natural order of the world, like as obvious as the law of gravity. So there's just a lot of like pressure, I guess, to believe it. And it was just so obvious to me as a kid because it just was what reality was according to the adults in my life. And then also it made me stress about weird things like having time with a friend on a Sunday. And then there was lots of judgment. So many things seemed self-evident to me. Like if people didn't agree with me, it seemed like they were, purposefully turning away from God. And I also was a dutiful missionary, and I planned to get married in the temple to a man as young as I can remember. I don't remember a time where that wasn't my plan. I also had a lot of magical beliefs. And then, yeah, so that's about it. It's kind of crazy growing up in Mormonism, and it's crazy to look back. It's been really satisfying to me to look over old stories like this and just remember days gone by. I think it's just very cathartic and nice to kind of go through it for myself. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you would like to see more content, please like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, all the things you would like to do. One thing I will say though is please leave me comments. If you hated it, please leave me a hate comment. I've been disappointed to see that all my hate comments aren't even relevant. One of them accused me of being lesbian. The other one, I think, accused me of being trans. Like a trans man. I don't know. Frankly, I'm confused. I think it's just a bot because it didn't seem at all relevant to the video. And then one person just commented random letters. So please leave me relevant comments. And if you're interested in supporting me or in seeing more content, then please check out my Patreon. And the link for that is down in the description. And I hope you have a great day and keep laughing. Bye-bye.